Well, it's 7 o'clock.
Yep.
So
Hang on 1 minute, Roger. I'm
okay.
got to get YouTube up.
All right.
And yeah. Okay, Roger, go ahead.
All right. It's 7 o'clock. This is Menomonee Falls Camera Club. We meet every first Tuesday of the month, every month except August. And I'd like to welcome any guests that we might have that haven't been with us before. Is there anybody? Okay.
I don't think there is, Roger.
Okay. And pretty much everything that we'll discuss here will be covered in the newsletter. So from the Menomonee Falls Camera Club website, you can pick up on the newsletter, and if you're a member, it's probably mailed to you every month with all of the finest details that we can give. We have a picture collection called Community Spotlight that you would send your pictures to Jane Hurst. It says ASAP, but I believe May 30th is the deadline.
Yes, that's the final deadline. Because our
And
meeting and the slideshow will be for the June meeting, which is what, the 7th maybe? 6th, 7th?
I believe the 7th sounds familiar.
8 images, 2100 by 2100. No special email or web programs or anything, just send them via email.
Okay. Anyway, I forgot to mention why I'm running the show tonight is Joe had a medical procedure, very minor, but he didn't feel up to coming tonight. So one of the perks of being vice president is I get to run the meeting tonight. We're going to have a gathering in the park for the July meeting, which will actually not be on the normal first Tuesday of the month because that's conflicts with the 4th of July. It will be on July 12th, and it will be at Rotary Park in Menomonee Falls, a face-to-face meeting with everybody. Hope everybody can come. We're hoping to have a white elephant sale. Bring items that you want to sell, offer to the other members. And we're planning on having an ice cream social. And we're also looking for volunteers to help out on organizing some of that. Last Saturday, we had a outing at Shady Lane, and that was quite successful. A lot of people came out, and a lot of pictures are being posted on the Facebook site. If you haven't looked at them, there's some really nice pictures out there. And we have another outing coming up at the zoo, and Brian Latimus is organizing that. And that's going to be June 4th, and I believe that everyone's going to meet at 9:30 in front of the bank entryway. I guess I'm not exactly certain where
Yeah,
that
that's,
is.
that's the main entrance, the east side, just
Okay,
outside the doors. So it's between the welcoming sign and the US Bank welcoming area. So we'll meet out there. It's going to be a busy day. Those weekends have been quite busy, especially if the weather's halfway decent. So just get there when you can, and I'll hang around for a while, and we can talk about if you have any questions about where things are in the zoo. I'll try to help you with that. But and then I think we'll try to meet for lunch out around Evinrude, in that shelter area where we have in the past. So for people who are interested, we can do that also. So these are
okay.
some of the highlights, Roger.
Ideal equipment for that would be something like either a 70 to 200 millimeter lens or longer.
Yeah.
And I believe Ian is putting together a trip to Chicago. Is that right?
That's correct. Details are forthcoming as I'm going to eventually make a trip down there myself, kind of walk it myself, kind of figure out what we want to do, what a good plan would be, because I try to change it up so we're not just doing, we've done the river walk in the past, we've done other areas. There'll obviously be some overlap, but try to do something different, maybe do the museums this year, so
Okay.
the buildings.
So approximately when do you predict that'll be?
I think we targeted June 18th, I believe. I'm kind of pulling that number out, but I'm pretty sure that's what we said.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll confirm. Yeah, June 18th is what we're planning.
Okay.
So I'll let a lot more details hopefully by the June meeting.
All right. The we've got president challenges of collection pictures sent in by the members every month. This month it is water in all forms, and I'll show those here. And next month it's new/old growth. So if I can share my screen, I'll show you the water pictures for this month. So are you seeing Joe Higdon's picture or photo at the moment?
Not yet.
Probably. Let me try. Seems like I screen one.
There you go.
Yeah, that's better. I do that enough times, eventually I'll get it right. I'll put this on slideshow and we'll see what pictures we have here. That one's a surprise to me. I guess I didn't know there was a movie file in there. Let me go on. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'll start from that point and go on with the other pictures here. Okay, that's what we have for this month.
Hey, Roger, where did you shoot the jellyfish?
Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Ah.
I was just out west in California a couple of weeks ago, and so the pictures that were from out there were from that trip. I've got 15,000 pictures I'm going through and just pulled out a couple that pertain to this, and that's been my entertainment lately for is going through all those pictures. Okay, we have for show and tell. Gosh, I'm on there, and Bernard Hall is. And we were going to show how we display our pictures to other people, how we show them off. Bernard, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Roger, let me
Yeah.
just interrupt a minute before you start. The tips and hints is more of mine because we discussed how people do share their photos, but what I would like to find out so that I can put together a resource, this is something that I did for the other members, is where do you get your books printed? Has anybody ever printed on glass? Has anybody ever printed their images on metal so that I can put together a resource that members have used and trust? Has anybody sold any of their pictures? So before, that's what the tips and hints is more or less meant for, because I think last month we discussed that some people make books, some people, I lost my mind already. Some people get pictures. I use mixed tiles. Ian uses his patented formula of making gallery walls and so on. So that's all I want to say for now until we get in there. And then that's what I would like to either have people share tonight or send me information. But I'll, believe it or not, I still have more words so I can talk to you about that after the show and tell. Okay. I'll shut up now.
Bernard, did you want to go first? And
Sure. Okay.
I got some stuff I'll be setting up while you're doing your show.
Okay. This is just a selection of pictures of birds, and they were all taken from my backyard. So we start with the robin. Just to get a close-up of the robin, and here's a bluebird or a blue jay trying to peck at a slice of bread. And this, I think, is a flicker, a member of the woodpecker family. And this time of year is when I go nuts trying to get the Baltimore Oriole to come into my yard. Here's one of them in midair. Then here is one eating some grape jelly. And another one where the orange has fallen on the ground. And another one eating an orange. I don't like to get the bird feeders usually in the pictures because it seems like, say, cheating, trying to get the bird in its natural habitat, but sometimes they're hard to do. Here's with some other birds, although this particular picture I think is kind of cluttered, where there's too much going on there, where you're it gets distracting trying to find the birds. The problem with autofocus is that it seems to get a branch in front of the bird where the camera usually doesn't know what you're looking at through the lens. And this is probably my favorite picture of the Baltimore Oriole, with no feeders or anything in the to distract. This is a picture of a cat who is also came in to look for birds. This is the the grosbeak. Is another bird that's only around for a very short time as a migratory bird. This one here is a little better focus of the grosbeak. And here's a finch. And this is a hawk that has come in. And when the hawk comes in, then of course all the other birds scatter. You see a hawk, the first thing people like to ask is he banded? And on here, I don't really see that he is banded on his leg. And here he is where he has got something. It's either a rabbit or a squirrel, but he had found some lunch one day. And there's a cardinal, which is not migratory, so they're around most of the year. And they have some mallards that like to come in the spring when there's more water in the creek. And here is a mother with, I think there's like 9 ducklings that were around, and I affectionately called this family the cheaper by the dozen. And it was rare, but one time there were some turkeys in the backyard. They don't come very often, but they came one day, and I was able to grab the camera before they got all spooked and flew off. And that's what I have. So back to you, Roger.
Okay, I guess I'm not muted. I thought I was. Okay, well, since Ellen's expecting a different presentation than what I had prepared, I'll show something else here.
What do you mean, Roger?
Well, I thought we were supposed to show how we present our pictures to other people, friends and family, and whether they
And-
were printed out or whether they were by some other means. But
I have no problem with that.
okay. Well, then let me go with that.
We're a free-flowing group.
Yeah, I'm
Just take
just,
me a few seconds to switch gears here is
Right.
all.
and I can fill up that void real easily. I want to put together resources for the entire group so that that we have it all in one place. I mean, I know Ian gets his books printed at some place and he's really happy with that. Other people have used other services, but I would like to present as many or put together as many different resources so that our members can have this sort of at their fingertips, whether it's mixed tiles or whether it's books or whether it's gallery walls or whether they print on, I don't know, I'll find out later if somebody's printed on glass, because I see some of those commercials and I just wonder. Blankets, I printed on blankets, I printed on mugs, some other places that and I go to Walgreens once in a while, so they make nice gifts. Ready, Roger?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'll shut up again.
Okay. As I work in Lightroom, typically what I'll do is if I'm doing competitions, I'll make collections for the competitions, and actually I've got a folder called Potential that I'll throw in all of the pictures that are potential competition pictures. And then when anything wins any type of award, I have a collection that holds that. Also, when I do traveling, which is my big thing and a big focus of all my pictures, I'll take all of the pictures from a trip and put them together in a collection. Here, I'm assuming that you're seeing my Lightroom right now. Am I correct?
That's right.
Okay. And so here's a collection of all of the pictures that I took at Door County. Now, these are the pictures that I want to show to other people. And so I do it by year. So each year I've got a number of different places that I go. National parks, Russia, Wedding, Killeen. And then after that, I'll send those pictures to different places. One is I'll send it to my website. Now, usually people know that when I'm taking a trip, I'll put something in my featured gallery here, which was the Northwest US last fall. And if they go underneath travels, I've got a similar setup to what you saw in collections of my each year that I went and where I went, and they can go and see those pictures. It's easy for people to find pictures that they might want to say, I'm going to Yellowstone, and they can find some of my Yellowstone pictures to see. Now, another place that I also send my pictures to is on my computer. I have, I've got to find it now here again. we go. I've got a media server, and underneath that media server, I will put that same collection of pictures. I name them a little bit differently because when I go to each of my televisions in the house, I can pull up the media server and show pictures from any of these and do a slideshow. And with my remote, I can go forward and back. So if I want to show someone that's come over, wants to see my latest trip pictures, I can project them on the TV and show those. So I've got those two venues. I've got a few pictures that I put up in the house. And if I just took a shot the other day, like here's where I've got going down the stairway to the basement, a couple of my pictures. Also, I'm going to pop out of sharing. And another thing that I do that is easy enough for me to take where it's going to be awkward to show media to people, I put together a book. And in that book, just a 3-ring binder, I put in plastic pages, and I'll put in a 8x10 print, and I'll put in the award that I won. So go through these, and I've got an awful lot that are a picture such as that, and the ribbon for an honorable mention. And for someone who hasn't seen any of my pictures before, that seems to be impressive to them to see a print in front of them. They're only 8x10, so they aren't really the same format as what I put in the competition or anything. But that seems to be pretty effective. People like to scroll through it. And I think that's about all that I've got. Let me check my notes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you said that you are able to hook up to your TV, what does that all involve? I mean, do you have a program from your PC that directly goes to your TV, or what are the steps one would need to do that?
Well, I'm pretty certain you can do it wireless too, but my TVs and my computer are hooked up with Ethernet, and I think that makes it a little easier. You don't have speed issues. But in my router, there is a media server, and I can, which basically automatically runs, and I can hook up to my router a hard drive. And I've got a 1 terabyte hard drive hooked up to my router. And so basically what I put on that router or on that hard drive out there, that can be seen on my TVs. And basically there's a source selection on the TV, and one of those, the media server shows up.
Okay.
It may take a couple hours after I put the pictures on the hard drive before it shows up there. But yeah, I can just navigate to the media server and go through the folders to the set of pictures that I want. And I can show them on the TV individually or as a slideshow. And
Is it using, excuse me, is it using Plex for the software?
It might be. My previous server, I really had a lot of trouble with it, but I learned some things about it. And then I got a new router, and I think it might be Plex Media Server that's on it. And I just put the files in there, and they show up on the TV.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like those canvas paintings that you have, that you made.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the company that I got those from. It's something like Canvas on Sale or something like that. And they're typical of a lot of those places that you wait for the sales and then you can get them pretty darn cheap. I think something like I have one that's 30 by 20 that I probably paid about $30 for. So I don't have a lot of money invested in that. I don't like to print a lot of stuff and put it up because my repertoire is changing all the time, and frankly, I'm getting better pictures all of the time, and so I think I'd want to change them out too much.
Those photos you put on your router and your are those limited to JPEGs?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And you've printed your photos on canvas material?
Yeah,
Okay.
I had one printed on glass once, and I wasn't particularly happy with the way it was printed, and then they gave me a runaround when I complained. So I don't really promote that, but I could send you the information on this canvas place that I have had it do. It's not, it's not gallery quality, but it's certainly good enough to hang up in the house.
Especially if your photos change. Yeah, I get that. So yeah, if you could send that to me so that I can start to put together at least a listing of the various places that people use to show their pictures. But you have your own website also, correct?
Right. I use Zenfolio for that, and one of the nice things about that is that I believe I have one gallery out there right now, which I have that people can actually purchase stuff from. And all the rest of it I have locked down that people could email me if they wanted to purchase something, but it's not automatically set up that they can
Just okay.
order a print with a frame and glass and all of that stuff. And of course, I don't get any real traffic through there other than what I promote because, I'm not on any search engines or anything like that.
We have in the chat, anybody, Joette asking, has anyone used Shutterfly for Canvas?
I just checked Canvas or Canvas on Demand. They got some really reasonable prices. They must have that sale for Mother's Day weekend. My gosh, you can get
Clint, you got muted.
sorry about that. You can get like a 16 by 20 for, I think, only $35.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We do sales almost constantly. I've done a ton of canvases with them, and they usually, the 16 by 20s usually average $20 to $25.
Yeah, they're
shipping.
23. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. 23 for a 16 by 20. Very good
Yeah.
price.
That's pretty consistent. It's almost always on sale.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
the shipping runs about $20, so if you order, multiples, canvases at a time, then it reduces your shipping.
I believe the one I was dealing with is Canvas on Sale.
Yeah,
It
I
may even
use,
be the same company on a different name.
yeah, I use Bay Photo for all my canvas metal prints, glass photos, regular photos.
That
So
would,
bayphoto.com has a
that would
lot of good
definitely,
stuff.
that would definitely be helpful if we have, you know, a resource where we can find all this information, what Ellen wants to do.
Well, and if she gets it all pulled together, I can put it on the website.
Ellen, give us a deadline for submitting that. I do better with deadlines.
Brian needs pressure.
I think we all do, actually. Yeah. How about let's do it by the end of this month. If I leave it go too long, I'm going to forget about it. So let's just say when is everything else due? Probably around the digital forum, 28th, 29th, 30th. So let's go for the end of May so that we can put something together, because it would be nice, you know, when you think of things, just to go, no, oh, I suppose I could text somebody, but I'm not going to get back to them right away and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll do the legwork on that, Jeff, and then you can put it up. So I'm pretty good at doing that.
And we don't want to forget Allied Digital Photo in Germantown can do a lot of this stuff as well. I believe they do some canvas printing, or they have a source for it. They have a source for metal prints, but they do regular prints. They do books. They do greeting cards. And of course, our club gets a discount from them. So plus they're a local shop in Germantown. So
They're very
think
good.
about using them for a lot of that stuff, because
Yeah,
they've got good prices.
they're very good, and they're accommodating. You know, he can tell you what you need. He can look at your file. I've had him print some really big prints for me.
Yeah, and they can go very big. They can go into the
Yeah.
30 by 40 print size
Yeah,
and mount it.
and mount
you.
it.
Okay.
And then you don't get it wrapped in a tube.
That's
Okay.
Yeah, don't uncurl so very well. All right, so I'll get that going so that we've got a source for, and like I said, I've even given gifts with printed on mugs, you know, when I want a cheap little Christmas gift or something. Well, they're not so cheap once in a while, but you have to worry about it. For people to remember vacations and so on by. But I have been seeing more and more information about, I think one commercial was printing on glass. And I just wondered how heavy that would get, and you know what you can expect with that. Or is there something with metal, that sort of thing? So not sure.
Here's one printed on glass, and that's a inch thick plexiglass, if you really want to do it right.
Wow.
Is that a
I've got
weapon or is that a decorative piece?
It could be. If they don't like my picture, I can hit them over the head with it. But Bay Photo does these and does a real nice job. And it gives it a nice look. It's very heavy.
Where did you get that done?
Bay Photo.
Oh, Bay
Photo.
Photo.
And that's glass and not acrylic?
Well, it's acrylic, really.
Okay.
There isn't much that's actually printed on glass. I do have one that's printed on 1/4 inch glass upstairs. This is acrylic. but works out real nice. Not cheap though, when you print this size. This is only a 5x7 and I think it was $40. But if it's a photo you really like, it's worth doing.
Yeah, and if it's a person you really like, then it's worth it also. So double win, on that sort of situation.
Ellen, would you like maybe YouTube channels too? That, like some people, I like to watch their YouTubes for cameras. Would you like that?
That's not a bad idea, Clinton, if you could send that, because listen, I can go down a rabbit hole. Once I start looking for things, it's like just click here and I get lost. And
Yeah, I know you can get 100 windows open up at one time. I know. I've been there.
Yeah, not with AT&T, trust me on that one. But so anything I am looking at, any way that people can share photos. I mean, I know I've had blankets printed. I think somebody had pieces of fabric done so that they could make a quilt, or was I dreaming that?
That was me, Ellen.
Oh, okay. I wasn't. Okay. Yeah, because you did that for your family or something like that. That was a nice idea. Whether it's large or small, sometimes that's very, very useful. So I'll tell you what, I'll get it started. We can always add to it later on, but the hardest part is getting something down on paper. But that's why I embellished the tips and hints and carried over from last week a little bit to expand so that people have this at their fingertips. So, all right. We're good.
Okay, so then let's move on. The next month in June, we're going to have election of officers, and we'll need to elect another vice president, since I'll be leaving that spot open and becoming president. If you have someone that you want to nominate, please send that to Jeff. I believe you're collecting names for that.
Yep.
Okay.
How many do you have?
Oh, I have so many, it's hard to count.
Yeah, and time's running short.
Let's see, how many do we have here tonight? 1, 2. I've got 20 right now looking right at you guys, so.
That's okay. Throw anyone underneath the bus. No big deal.
Find somebody who's not here, Jeff.
Oh, is that what I've got to do?
Yes.
And remember, I don't multitask well, so I can't nominate myself and still do the newsletter, because that's just too beyond my my focus once in a while.
Yeah, so we do need a volunteer, so please, if you'd like to become vice president, and the year after you become president, it would be great. Otherwise, look out one Sunday night around 9 o'clock at night. I will be calling to see if you'll.
Yeah, I know how that works.
Yep. Bill started that, and it seems to work good. Catch everybody when they're a little weaker on a Sunday night. So,
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any wacko news?
The only wacko news would be the wacko competition is coming up on Saturday. If you haven't signed up for watching it on Saturday, it starts at 11:30. It'll go till about probably 2 o'clock. We will be picking the medal award images. If you haven't gotten an email for watching that, send me a note and I will send you the link to sign up. But everybody should have probably gotten one way or another.
I got the email, but I also think the one in the newsletter works also. It's at the bottom of
Yeah.
the page. So I usually test those out. And so
Right, so
far, them
we've got it in a
working.
bunch of spots, so.
Okay.
It's a fun thing to watch for a couple hours, and they'll pick the first, second, and third place winners, and then we'll show the honorable mentions and the award-winning images when it's all done.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And that's
And,
all we have for Wacko.
And that leads into digital forum. Any news from that? I was in the last meeting and that was pretty good.
Yeah, the last digital forum meeting went over really well with the weather photographer, Mike Mazula. So we're working on another speaker for this month. It's a little harder for May because it's Labor Day weekend, and I'm having a harder time finding somebody. So we may just have something more general purpose for the second hour. The first hour, of course, you bring your questions and we'll try to answer them for you.
You mean Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, it's Memorial Day weekend. Did I say Labor Day again?
I never get them right.
Yeah, yeah. Memorial Day weekend. So yeah, so it's a little harder to find a speaker then, but I am working on a infrared photographer for June. So maybe we'll get lucky and find somebody that does infrared photography. So, and we'll have stuff all summer long if I can pull it off. So,
and then
come join us.
And then news for PSA. PSA has a outing coming up that they're going to La Crosse, and I believe it's the 12th to the 15th. And
something like that.
Yeah, and mainly it's a get together of photographers that go out alone or in groups to some of the various sites and come back together again in the evening and share what kind of photos they have and what they hope to do the next day.
I also, Roger, would like to say I went to the PSA main website to check out their new and improved site, and it's actually quite a bit easier to navigate and is a whole lot less cluttered, and it appears to be more organized. Haven't had a chance to go in depth, but it makes it a whole lot easier than being confronted with that whole distracting array of photos, colors, shapes, symbols that there was before. So this was quite soothing, actually. I should have probably just had a little drink and spent some time there.
Yeah, I agree. The new website is quite nice. Oh, okay. So if there isn't anything else, could we?
Yeah, Hazel's here.
Go on to our featured speaker. Hazel?
Yeah, she's here. Welcome, Hazel, to the group. Did you have an introduction, Roger, or did you want me to do it, or do it?
I think you could better do it than I at the moment.
Okay. I've run into Hazel once or twice at PSA. I noticed reading her little bio that she's also an Ashbrook winner from PSA, which I was a couple of years ago as well. So the only thing we have in common, because she's a lot better photographer than I am.
I doubt that.
But she's an award-winning photographer, teacher, speaker, workshop leader, does a lot of different stuff. Today, she's going to be talking about textures. I actually forgot the title of it, but she can tell us that. So I don't think, I'm not going to read her whole bio because everybody's gotten that in our newsletter. But welcome, Hazel. Thank you for coming. We look forward to hearing your presentation and
Thank
making
you.
better pictures.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your having me. Yeah, we've run into each other at a couple, I think SwimSea was one of the conferences that
Oh, that could
you
be
taught
too.
out.
Yep.
Yeah, you were
Yep.
teaching that year too. I think we
Yeah,
both were.
I've
And
taught there quite a bit too.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Tonight we are going to talk about working with textures and how to create some and photograph them and do some applications with them. And the title of it is Working with Textures and Overlays, Turn Ho-Hum into a Work of Art. I like to take those maybe not so perfect images, and with some textures, you can make them into something really special. And then you can also take your really good images and make them even better. I also like to compare it with, you know, sometimes we all go to an event or the iconic spots and you've seen lots and lots of pictures of basically the same thing. So by using some textures and changing things up, you can make it uniquely your own. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to do just a couple of quick slides to give you a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to get into some actual processing. All right. So as I mentioned, I say don't delete that image. We all have those images. Maybe it was less than ideal lighting conditions, a shot we like just because we were there, maybe on a vacation, a place you can't get back to easily, or a subject that was hard to capture, so maybe it's not quite tack sharp. Tonight, I'm going to show you how to take some of those imperfect shots and give them a wow factor using textures and overlays. The key to working with textures is changing the blending mode of the texture layer. This determines how the texture interacts with the layer below it. The most used blending modes for texture work are multiply, lighten, overlay, soft light, and hard light. And I'll be showing you some of those as we go along. Oh, and also, if you have any questions as I go, please do unmute yourself and ask the question so I don't mind. And I usually will ask at the end of each project if there's any questions as well. So textures are everywhere. When you're on a photo shoot, look for things that can be used as textures. These are just a few things that I photographed, like cracked concrete. This was paint across a walkway in a parking lot, fabrics, in-camera blurs. This was a filter over a crocheted scarf, wallpaper. Hotels are great places to find textures with wallpapers and fabrics and things. This was copper or rock, and one of my favorites, rusty metal. And then you can also take your texture images and modify them to create even more textures. I also do a blog 3 times a week, and I'll give you all that info at the end. But on Sundays, I give away free textures. And although you can't use those in competition images, it can also inspire you to create some of your own. So this was wood, and I processed this 3 different ways with Smart Photo Editor. And I'm going to show you this one tonight. This was cracked paint, and we're going to use Topaz to create a new version of that. And then I'm also going to show you how to create some with brushes. And these are all ones that I've created in Photoshop. And there are numerous places you can get textures online, both free and for purchase. Of course, if you are using them in competition, the textures must be your own photos. Some clubs do allow them in a creative division to use commercial textures. Of course, my website's a great resource, and I have quite a few texture sets there. And I forgot to change the dates on this, but we have our next conference coming up the end of June, and I have some info at the end. We used to do live conferences in New England, my husband and I, and we lived in Connecticut. I've lived there my whole life until 2.5 years ago, we moved to Tennessee. which is where we are now in the northeast corner. We're about an hour and a half north of Gatlinburg and the Smokies. So we have been doing virtual conferences since COVID came along, and it's great because we can get people from all over the world watching. So it's 2 full days, 8 speakers, 13 hours. And you get speaker notes and a goodie bag and all kinds of fun stuff. And it's only $39. So I'll send some info that Jeffrey can distribute later on as well. All righty, so let's get to the good stuff. I'm gonna open up my Photoshop. And I'm going to start with showing you how to create a texture in Photoshop. So you can use these general instructions and use different brushes to do a similar process, so they will be your own texture. So I always start with a blank new file. So we're going to go File, New. And I have a preset set here, and I like to do my textures at 15 inches by 15 inches, 300 DPI. RGB color, 8-bit is sufficient for a texture. I am going to change my background to white and sRGB. Great. And we're going to do each layer of our brushwork on a separate layer so that we can make changes as we go along. So I'm going to add a blank new layer. I'm going to come over to my brush panel. And for this one, I'm going to use under the dry media brushes. This is a Photoshop brush. This bonus chunky charcoal makes a great texture. I'm going to double click that one. For the first one, I'm going to start with about 900 pixels. So I'm going to use my square bracket keys to make my brush bigger. Those are the brackets to the right of the letter P on your keyboard. And I'm going to choose my foreground color. And I like to start with a lighter color and then go darker. So I've written these down, of course, so I can replicate it, but you would just, click around till you find a color that you like. We're going to work with blues for this particular one. And then the other thing that you want to check is some brushes are by default set to rotate the actual brush stroke as you click around. And I'm going to go into my brush settings, and I'm going to make sure that some of these are checked off, which it looks like they are. So my shape dynamics, I want the size jitter, so the size of the brush stroke changes just a little bit. I want to make sure that the scattering is on a little bit, so I'm going to spread this, and you're going to see how it changes down here, just so it gives some variety to the brush strokes. And then in the texture, we're going to leave that at the default. And usually it's just those two that I check to make sure there are some changes. And if not, then you can change them a little. So I have my brush settings docked over here, but if you don't, you would just go to Window, Brush Settings to open that panel. And then we just start clicking. And I'm using a mouse, and you can see the brush is rotating as I click. And we just want to cover the layer, but not solidly, but you want it to be fairly consistent around the canvas. And I try and move my mouse, not, you don't want to be stamping like in a row. You want it to be very random. So you don't want to get patterns developing in your texture. And if you happen to get too much in one area, you can just undo a stroke or two as needed. So sometimes I get going too fast and then I go, oops, and I have to undo a lot more strokes. So you just try and keep an eye on that as you go along. Always make sure to get your edges as well. Like I said, you want fairly consistent. It doesn't have to be perfect. And it's going to be different every time you try and do one. I've done the same texture probably 50 times and it looks a little bit different every time. So that's our layer one. So we're going to add another blank layer. I'm going to change my color. This time we're going to use 203 D57, so a little bit darker shade of blue. We'll say okay. I'm going to make my brush Let's go 1100 pixels, slightly larger, just to vary the sizes a little, and start stamping. So sometimes it gets difficult to see if you've covered everything with the first layer showing. So you can just turn off that eyeball so you temporarily hide that one. And then you can make sure that you've got good coverage on your next layer. So this is something that's fairly mindless and easy to do if you're tired of doing some real editing and need a little mental break. This is a great way to create some art and not have to think too hard about it. And there's lots of different brushes in there to try, and I'm going to show you how to get some more brushes in a while. So there is our second layer. So we're going to add one more layer. I'm going to go with an even darker color, 051829. And let's make our brush a little bit bigger, 1300. I'm going to turn these two off. And we're just going to fill this one. If you have a Wacom tablet, of course, you can use that as well. I have one, I just don't use it all that much. I get so used to doing everything with the mouse. Okay, and that should do it. So there's our 3 layers. So the one thing you can do, we have our darkest layer on top. If that looks too heavy when you're done stamping, you can always drag the order of the layers if you want to, maybe pull the brighter colors up. I kind of like it like that. So that's one way to do it. So the first thing that we're going to do is, this one right now has the white background. So you can save this with the white background as a texture. This would be ready to go. First thing you want to do is save it as either a TIFF or a PSD file to retain your layers. And I'm going to show you why that's important in just a moment. And then after that, you can save it as your JPEG. So I would do a file save as and go to whatever folder you want to put it in, and then save it as the TIFF, then save it as your JPEG. Then we can also add another layer and change our background color. And instead of changing the white layer, I'm going to add a layer in here, and I'll show you why in just a second. So I'm going to choose a color for my background, and we're going to use 97CAF8, a light blue. And I'm going to fill this layer with the color. On a PC, the keyboard shortcut is Alt Backspace. On a Mac, it's Option Delete. So I think that color is too dark. So rather than choosing another color, because I have the white layer behind it, I can just lower the opacity of this color. If I didn't have that white layer, it would become transparent, which wouldn't work very well. So we'll go with something like that. And that would be another version of that texture. So save this as your TIFF file. And one of the reasons we want to keep that TIFF file is to say we absolutely love this texture, but we want to have a version in green instead of blue. So instead of having to restamp all of this, I'm going to hide everything but layer 1. I'm going to choose a new color. For this one, I'm going to use 69DC6C. Say OK. And now I want to fill this layer with color, but I don't want it to be a solid like we did with the blue. We want to keep the transparent pixels transparent. So all you have to do is hold the Shift key while you do your Alt Backspace or Option Delete. And now we've changed that layer to green. So we can turn on our second layer, and we're going to pick our color. And this one is 33A. Shift Alt Backspace. Turn on layer 3. Change our color. 064 E08, Shift Alt Backspace. So now we have a version in green. And again, you can, maybe this one you might want a little more of the darker color showing. You can slide your layers around as needed. And then we're going to add our background. And for this, 92F894. And just Alt Backspace. And again, we can adjust that opacity as needed. And there you have it. So you could make a whole library of textures just out of that one set of layers, just by changing the colors. So once we have this done and we've already saved it as our TIFF file, I'm going to flatten this as if it were my JPEG version. So let's go to our layers and flatten it. And the other thing we can do with this is we could blur this layer. So let's say we wanted to use it to add some bokeh to the background. So I'm going to go to our blur, our Gaussian blur, and you can do it as much or as little as you want to create some nice soft bokeh. And there you would have it. So then you can save another version. So there's tons of things you can do with all of these. So definitely experiment, try some different filters, and play around a little bit. Any questions on that? Perfect.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
When you're using the brushes, I think there's a setting in there that allows for color variation. Are you using color variation with these brushes?
I did not change any of that, but if we go into our brush settings, there is a color dynamics option. So you can, if you want to change the hues and have that change a little bit, and or the saturation as well as brightness. So you can, and you can also have it alternate between your foreground and background. So there are definitely various ways. Let's try that and see what we would get. Let's put a new layer on here. And let's pick something different for our background. Let's choose a dark green, see what happens. And let's try that. So you can see you're getting some variety of colors as well as a mixture from the darker and the lighter. So yes, you can definitely do that as well. There's lots of different ways you can adjust all of these things. I kind of like this actually. And sometimes you do things like this and you go, I kind of like that. So it's happy accidents, I call them. So you never know what you might come up with. There you go. That's a pretty cool one. So thank you. Great question. Alrighty, so I'm going to close that one. I'm not going to save it because I have these all saved. So now to modify a texture, so I'm going to open that Rust one that I showed you. And this is going to be a slightly different version because the one I have in this slideshow I actually did a while ago and I didn't write down the exact steps, and this I cannot get the settings exactly the same, but it's going to be similar. So when you're working with programs like Topaz, they do not create a separate layer like the Nik products do. So I always duplicate my layer. And I've already done a basic edit and color correction and sharpening on this particular image. And I'm going to go into my filter. I'm going to go into Studio. So I've been working with Topaz for quite a few years. I am an affiliate and I've done 13 webinars for them. Unfortunately, they no longer do webinars and they have also stopped updating Studio 2 and a lot of their older products. Right now, their active products are Sharpen AI, Denoise AI, Gigapixel AI, and their video AI product, which is very disappointing because I love Topaz creative products, and at some point they'll just not work when we update, to a version that's not compatible anymore. So it's a big bummer, but I still use it as much as I can. So for this one, I am going to add a filter, and I am going into impression. And I love using this on textures because it gives it a very painterly look. So when you're in impression, you can see it's already started making a few changes here. You can change the brush stroke, and I'm going to use this one. And of course, when I created this, these are all, you know, it's trial and error and moving sliders and finding, come on, move down, being a little difficult. Well, that's weird. Let's close that up. I need to get below that. There we go. A little stuck there. So I want a low number of strokes, so the strokes are bigger. And then I just started moving things around. And again, it's just move the sliders, and this blue line means it's processing as you go along. So I lowered the opacity a little bit. And then I did do some stroke rotation in here. Rotation variation. And this also has a color variation. The stroke width, length. And the big one with this is spill. And as it processes that, you're going to see a big change as soon as this finishes. And then we have smudge. And I don't always use all of these sliders. It just depends on what it is that I'm doing. And then I came down to the lighting tab and brightened it just a little bit and brought my highlights down and the shadows. And then I'm going to hit, as soon as it's done processing, hit accept to go back to Photoshop. And who would think that that came from rusty old metal? So the one thing I don't like are these couple of darker spots here. So I'm just going to grab my healing brush, and because it's a texture and it's random to begin with, I don't have to be all that particular, but I'm just going to blend these so that they don't stand out quite as dark from everything else. And again, each time I do this, I get these darker spots in different places. It's just the nature of this process. So once you have something you like, be sure to save it because you'll never be able to recreate it exactly. And that would be our texture. So then I would save this. If you wanted to save it as a layered file, you could, as long as you have your original saved. You could just save this one as a JPEG. And I'm going to apply this to an image. So I'm going to open up an image. I'm working with two monitors, so I'm just opening things from my other screen. And this was an image I did a while ago that I had already processed and done some other topaz effects on. So I'm going to use the one I already have saved, and I'm going to drag it from the other screen, and then I'm going to show you how to bring in a texture if you don't have two screens. So I'm just going to drag it and drop it, and it will add it as a new layer. And then using my move tool, I'm just going to stretch it to cover my image. And then this is where the blending modes come into play. And for this one, I used multiply, and then I lowered the opacity of that texture layer a little bit. So this particular one on this image, I really liked what it did for the music book. It just gave it a lot more antique look, and on the keys as well. So I'll show you the before. It's a little bit brighter. And then the after, just it added a little more texture overall, but I really like what it did on the lighter areas of this image. Any questions there? Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and close all of these. All right, let's close this one and this one. And I'm going to open up one of those not so perfect images. This was an image, probably one of the first few that I ever did textures on. And I had shot this at the Rose Garden up in Hartford, Connecticut. And I just always loved the way the center of this flower was, but it was just too soft down here. But this actually works really well with texture. So I'm going to show you how to bring in a texture if you don't have a second monitor to drag it from. So you would just, you've got this file open, you would just open your second file. And let me get to my correct folder here. And I'm going to use this texture. And this one is actually scrapbook paper that I photographed. So you can go to the local craft store if you have a Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or even Joann Fabric sells them. They sell single sheets as well as large books of textures, and you can photograph those and use them as textures. So now we have two separate files. So we need to get that texture into the file with the rose. So again, using our move tool, click on the tab for the texture, and I like to separate it, and then click anywhere in here, click hold, and drag your mouse over the image. And when you let go, the texture is now over here. So you can close this file. And then we're just going to move this into position and size it to the size of our image. And again, we're going to change our blending mode. And this one I'm going to use soft light. And I lowered the opacity to about 82%. Now I loved the way the texture looked on the edges of this image, but I didn't want the texture on the center of the flower because I really wanted to emphasize that area. So I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking our icon down here. We're going to go over and grab a soft round brush here, and that's a little too big. And in this case, because I don't want to take all of the texture off of these edges, I want to blend it in. I'm going to lower the opacity of my brush somewhere around 50%. I just kind of click in the middle, doesn't have to be exact. And then we're going to start, oops, yeah, black, masking this texture off the center. So I am going to take all of it off the very middle, and then I'm going to start kind of just blending it along the edges here. My brush smaller, can I get some of that in there? And remember, when you're masking, if you get something that you don't want or you want to bring back some of it, just hit the X key to flip your black and white, and then you can always paint back a little bit if you need to. And there we have it. And then the last thing I wanted to do with this was add just a slight vignette, even though the corners are a little bit dark already. And I'm going to show you how you can do that here in Photoshop. You can use, like Nick has a vignette setting, they have a couple. But if you add a new blank layer, and we're going to hit our default, and we're going to fill this layer with black with an Alt backspace. And I'm going to grab the elliptical marquee tool, put my cursor almost up to the edge in the corner, click, hold, and drag to the lower right corner. And now if I deleted this circle right now, it would be a very hard edge. I'll show you what that would look like, which is definitely not what we would want for a vignette. So we're going to soften that edge by going to Select, Modify, Feather. And I usually use about 200 to 250, depending on the size of my image. And I know this is a larger image, so I'm going to go with the 250. I'm going to say okay. And you'll see that circle seems to get a little smaller. So now I can just hit either my delete or my backspace key to get rid of that center. Control or Command D to deselect. Of course, that's much too dark. So we're just going to lower that opacity. And you always want a vignette to be so soft that somebody looking at the image, if they didn't see the before, is not going to even realize that it's there. So if you see my before and my after, so I've darkened the edges just a little, but it's not really noticeable. I really just wanted to focus my viewer's eye to that center of the flower. I did print these on note cards and that they came out really nice. It's a great for a thank you card, since it's a thank you, or it's just a nice little image like that. Any questions? Awesome. Close that one. So next we're going to take, and this is one that was in the slideshow, in camera movement, just of some blurred trees, just to swipe with the camera as you're taking the shot. And I did add just a teeny bit more blur with a motion blur as well to accent that even more. So you can not only use textures over your images, but you can also use brushes to, as we did before, just as a single texture. And you can also use a brush to modify a texture to create a new texture. So I'm going to add a new blank layer. I'm going to go to my brush menu. And for this one, I'm going to use one of my own sets of brushes from my store. And I have some grunge overlays. So I'm going to open this set. And I'm going to use medium grunge 2. So when you're using a brush like this, we're not going to do lots of stamping like we did when we were creating a texture. First, I'm going to change my color to 786D53. I'm going to make my brush almost the size of my image without going larger. And you definitely want to be on a separate layer for this. So I'm going to make it a little smaller just so you can see why we really need that separate layer. And I'm going to line it up with the upper left corner. And I want to make sure I take my opacity back to 100% because we can always lower it later. And then I'm just going to stamp one time with the brush. So now I can go to my move tool and stretch this to cover my image. If we had stamped on top of this image, you would not be able to change the size of it. And a lot of times the brush is a slightly different proportion than your image. So you always want it on a separate layer. And then we can also do blending modes. So for this one, I'm going to use overlay. And then I brought my opacity to about 78%. And then you could save this as a different version of this texture that you already had. So I'm going to show you how I used this on an image. So I'm going to open up this icy evergreen. And this is, we were visiting some of my husband's family up in the Buffalo area. It was around the holidays and it was very cold one morning and we had some ice on the tree. Now this is a very cool toned image. I'm going to use this texture and I'm going to bring in a finished version to kind of warm up that image a little. And these happen to be the same size already. So I'm going to change this to overlay and then just bring it back a little bit. So you can see the before, it's very cool, kind of bluish tone. And now we've got a really warm looking image. So you will learn the more you use textures, how not only the texture itself can change your image, but the color can modify your image as well. So the browns and yellows are going to warm an image, while the blues and greens are going to cool it down. Any questions on that one? All righty. You guys are good.
Those brushes, your brushes,
Uh-huh.
they're available for purchase?
They are. At the end, I will give you my website and all that info, and you can check them out.
Now, what do you as a PSA member think about buying a brush? Is that like buying a commercial texture?
In my opinion, no, because it's no different than using all of the brushes that are already in Photoshop. I didn't create those brushes, but I can still use those on images. So why not be able to use another brush? I personally think even texture should be allowed, because even though you might get a texture, say you purchased one for me or you got one for my Sunday sampler, odds are you're going to modify that in some way. And it's not like you're presenting this texture and saying, hey, this is my image. You're going to be blending it with your image. Often, and I'm going to show you my next project, I use multiple textures on an image. The next project I'm going to show you, I've used 6 textures on an image. So by applying multiples, you're blending them, you're changing them, you're making them your own version, but we have to abide by, rules. And I know most of the regional conferences as well as PSA definitely do not allow third-party textures, unfortunately. But I don't make the rules. I can only do what I can do. But you can also do this stuff on your personal work. Not everything we do is for competition. And I find myself more and more these days going, I don't really care if I like it for competition. I'm doing things that I like. And since we've been living in Tennessee, that includes shooting a lot of barns and old buildings and things like that now. And they definitely lend themselves to the grunginess of textures. And I like that aspect of processing. So I like doing creative things with my work. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it's an ongoing subject for sure.
It definitely is. And like I said, in my opinion, I think they should be allowed, because what's the difference if I went into Topaz Studio, there are textures in there. There's actually 59 of my textures in there because Topaz purchased textures for me to put in the program. And there's hundreds of others as well. So if I use a texture in there, it's part of a preset sometimes. Some of the different presets have textures in them. So what's the difference if I'm using a preset or if I apply the texture myself? You still have to make that choice and decide and manipulate it. So, but again, I don't make the rules. We can only do what we can do. All right. So this is the one I am going to show you multiple textures, and I routinely use anywhere from 2 to 5 textures on an image. This one is from my first ebook. I've written 2 ebooks on working with textures as well as creating your own. And this year I just released my first course on creating your own textures. So if you want to create more of your own, I'm releasing it over a few months, and I actually was working on a module today of creating textures in Procreate on an iPad. Is one of many ways you can do that. So it's going to have 9 different chapters of how to do it, and then it has a chapter of a bunch of resources as well. So anyway, so for this one, I'm going to open them from the other screen because it just makes it go a little faster. Oops, except that's not the way I want to open it. I want to drag it in. So this is a perfect example of just, it's kind of a blah type of a snapshot type image. We had done, our Connecticut Association of Photographers did a trip to Block Island. This was quite a few years ago. And so lots of people have this image, and there was no clouds in the sky that day. So I'm going to change this one to overlay. And I don't usually leave the opacity at 100%, but there's a couple in this project that actually worked. So you can see even with just one texture, I could just add a little bit more interest. And I'm not going to mask any of these off of the subject. Our next project will do some masking. I'm just going to leave it over the whole image. And this set of textures, all these 6 ones are from a company called Flypaper Textures. Before I was creating my own, I did purchase a bunch from other sources, and they allowed me to use these in the ebook and share them. My books also give you the images, the textures used in the projects, as well as the detailed notes, and there's some bonus textures as well. So this one I'm also going to leave at 100%. And bring in number 3. And this one we're going to change to overlay. And this one I brought down to about 54%. This one I thought would brighten things up a little bit. And I'm going to change this to soft light. And bring this one back just a little bit. And this next one, I like textures that have kind of a built-in vignette, like this one does. And this one I'm going to change to multiply, because that's going to get rid of most of the brightness of the color. It's just going to leave the border. And then we're going to lower this to about there. And one last one. This is also going to brighten everything a little bit. And we're going to change this one to overlay. And bring it to about 60. And there you have it, from this kind of ordinary type of an image to something I find much more attractive. So a question I often get when I start working with lots of textures like this is, when do you know when to stop applying textures? And I say, when you like the way it looks. So of course, the first time I do a project like this, I don't know that these are the textures that I'm going to end up using. I try lots of different textures. Even for me, to some degree, it's still trial and error. But the more you do it, the more you do get a feel for, like I said, what the colors will do and what might look good on an image. So as I was applying these, this one kind of darkened things a little. This first one, let's go back and I'll kind of walk through these. So we applied this and added just that subtle texture. And then this one, I liked the effect it had on the sky. And I liked that the lighter green almost followed the lighthouse. That was just pure coincidence. And then this one added a little more warmth to the color with the reddish brown tones. And then this one is called Nurial Clouds. So I was like, what the heck? If it's got clouds in the name, maybe that will look cool on the sky. And that definitely added a different tone to this image. The yellows definitely warmed it up a little. And then we did our border to just darken the edges. And then this last one just brightened it a little bit. And if you wanted it even brighter, you could, leave the opacity of that one higher. And then the other way you can change how textures look is to move the layers around, just like we did with when we were stamping the layers in the beginning and creating a texture with the brushes. By moving things around, it could change the way the different colors are interacting with each other. And then changing blending modes as well. So it's a lot of fun. I like the process and the experimentation of doing this. Alrighty, so I'm going to close this one. And we're going to do this little tufted titmouse that landed in our garden after the season was over. This was one of my stakes that was left behind. So we're going to do a couple things on this one. So the first thing I brought in, and these textures are some of my own. So first I brought in this grunge brown. These are some from my store. And we're going to bring this over. And actually, that's not the one I wanted to do first. Let me turn that one off. Sorry. I'm going to do this. Where's my green one? Painted green. Let's try this one. I seem to be missing one. This one is not one of mine. Or is it? Actually, it is one of mine. I've got so many things going on here. This one is one of mine as well, from one of my grunge collections. So we're going to bring this one down here because I want to apply this one first. And we're going to change this to soft light and leave it at 100%. Now I like what this did for the background, but I don't like the green tone on my bird. So I'm going to select my background layer. And I'm going to use the quick selection tool and say select subject. And it does a pretty good job on this bird. And you can see it did a really good job. I also do want to take the texture off this post, so that works well. And we could always adjust the tail once we get the mask made. So I'm going to click on this layer and add my layer mask. And it actually needs to be reversed. So we're just going to do Control-I to invert that mask. So now the texture is masked off the bird and it's on the background. And I'm just going to zoom in, grab my brush, make sure I'm on the mask to make this smaller. And we got to go back to our round brush. I'm going to go with a hard brush this time. And I'm just going to, and a cool little trick when you're painting and you want to draw a straight line, painting or masking or anything, if you click at the beginning of where you want to draw a line, oops, I got to be on light. Click at the beginning and then hold your shift key and click the end, and it will join those 2 points in a straight line. So it's a great way to quickly do straight lines like that. And so now I've already brought in the next texture, so we're going to overlay this. We're going to change this to multiply, and we're going to bring this way down. And again, I like it on the background, but not here. So we can copy this mask by selecting the mask and holding the Alt or Option key, click and drag it to the other layer, and it will repeat that mask up there. And then I actually did a different version of this with a slightly different texture. So I'm going to show you that one as well, because I thought this was a little dark. So this is where like the playing comes into play. And I'm going to bring in this one instead. This is from one of my watercolor collections. And then we're going to change that one to hard light and bring it back to about 80%. And then again, I can copy that mask, Alt and drag. And I think that's better than that one, although even the two together look nice. So see, it's a lot of testing. And what I'll do is I'll bring in maybe half a dozen textures and I'll try them and combine them, and some I'll delete, some I'll keep. And then just by turning, the eyes on and off, I kind of like that one. Darkens that one just a little bit to make it not too bright. And then you can just play with the opacities to adjust it. And then the last one I'm going to use, this is from one of my brush sets. It's old writing from a postcard that I scanned and cleaned up and made a brush. Well, I've made a brush and I also made it. This is a PNG version with a transparent background. So this one I didn't want to just stretch side to side because it would really distort the writing. So I'm going to stretch it this way. And then just stretch it a little bit to the sides. So you're not limited to keeping a texture on the image. You can also stretch it beyond it to get to an area that you like. And I'm going to use that one about there. And then we're going to change this one to soft light. So you can see with writing, if it's a dark color, you'll see these blending modes are going to darken things. This group is going to lighten them. So if you wanted the writing to be white or a lighter color, and then these work with the midtones and contrasts of the image. So I'm going to use soft light, and then I brought this down about 40%. And then once again, I'm going to copy this mask because I really don't want it on my bird. And there you have it. So that's another way you can work with multiples, and you can add some interest with writing and other cool things as well. Any questions? Awesome. All right, I have just a couple more. So this next one, I'm going to show you the original image, which is a real nothing kind of image. And then we're going to do something fun with it. So this was the blueberry bush in my backyard in Connecticut when it was just starting to sprout some buds and leaves. And I took this and deleted everything but this branch. I just made a selection of the branch, and I'm going to bring in another one I already have done. And then I flipped it. Oops, I don't want to on here. And I flipped it horizontally so it would be facing the other direction. I'm going to actually delete that layer and just open this as a standalone because I also cropped it a little bit. There we go. And this one I want, because I had the transparent background, I want to add some textures below this image, and then I added a couple on top of it. So this is another one. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things on here. So I like to start with a blank layer in the background, and then I'm going to fill with white. Again, so if I want to lower the opacity of that first texture, I'm able to do that because I have the white layer in here. It's also easier on the eyes than the checkerboard, I find, to have that white layer on the bottom. So I've got this layer selected. So when I bring in my first texture, it will be behind the flower bud. And this was one day we were at the rose garden, different day than when I shot that yellow one. And it was very windy and it was really hard to get sharp focus flowers. So I decided, well, let's take advantage of it and add some extension tubes and just shoot some out of focus colors for some bokeh. And so after I applied this one, I noticed that, my branch is going kind of lower left to upper right, and the darker part of this texture is going the opposite way. So I'm going to flip this texture horizontally. So I'm going to go to edit, transform, flip horizontal, so that the darker area kind of follows that branch a little bit better. And then I'm going to bring in one more bokeh background and blend with that. And this one I'm also going to flip because the bright pink is also going the opposite direction of kind of what I wanted to do. So edit, transform, and flip that one. And this one perfectly followed that branch, and that just happened to fall that way. Sometimes we get lucky. So this one I'm going to change to, let's see, the first one I actually changed my opacity a little bit. And then this one we're going to change to darken. And we're going to bring this one down to 74%. So we're blending these two layers together. So instead of masking textures off the branch, because I put these behind it, now I'm going to add a couple on top of it. So I didn't have to mask it off of these layers by bringing it in the background. So the next one I bring in, I also photographed this. This was more rust that I ran through impression and created a very painterly look. This one we're going to change to soft white and bring that to about 85%. You can see we're starting to build some nice texture in here now. And this next one, I shot this at the botanical garden, and this is how the clay pots get the whitish look on the outside of them from the minerals in the soil. And that's what this was a picture of, just a close-up of an old flower pot. I said textures are everywhere, you gotta look for them. Soft light, and also about 85%, 86. And the last thing I brought in was another, just a kind of a ragged border. I didn't want a real vignette on this, but I just wanted to darken the edges a little bit. And again, this one we're going to do multiply because that's going to get rid of the white and just leave the darker color. And we're going to bring this to about 65. And then because the edges were lighter on these two corners, I'm going to duplicate this layer with a Control J and flip that one vertically. Edit, transform, so that we get more consistent color around it. And there you have it. Again, you know, when you're first creating these, you're not going to go this quickly and know exactly which texture you're using. You're going to look through your library of textures and, you know, try different things and see what works. But I love the way the pink color here just like flowed right around this branch. I thought it just worked out perfectly. Any questions?
This is a quiet group tonight. I don't know.
They are, I know. Some groups I have are very talkative and others are not. So it always runs the gamut. You know, you never know.
I think a bunch are taking notes. I bet you Jane and Jesse, who do some of this stuff, are writing this down madly.
There you go. All righty. So we're going to close this one up. And get rid of this. I mean, that's taking like a real nothing image and really making something very pretty out of it. Because this is just like, you know, it was a gray sky day, you know, just a real, you know,
No,
I don't
that's
know
a neat
what
idea.
I was thinking kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of stuff like that. So.
We all do, right?
Oh, man.
So, but that's what makes it fun.
Neat. Gives a lot of good ideas.
Thanks. So I'm going to show you this one. So this, I've done the basic edit already on this, as with most of the base images that I've started with. This was one I just photographed in my kitchen. And those bleeding hearts were from my garden. I have some old bottles that I left the dirt inside of them that was already in there. And this wood at the bottom is scrapbook paper, one of those like 12 by 12 sheets of scrapbook paper. And my background is just one of those trifold project boards that the kids use for school, the white like foam core. And that's all that was, just photographing in my kitchen. And I decided I wanted to jazz this up a little more. So the first thing I'm going to do here is use a texture to add a little bit more green to this bottle. So I'm going to bring in, again, these are all my own textures. And this one, we really don't even need to cover the whole thing. I just need to make sure it's over that bottle. And I'm going to use a layer mask to do this. So I'm going to lower the opacity of this so I can see through it a little bit. And we're going to add our layer mask. And to make this even easier, I'm going to, instead of painting with black, I'm going to fill this layer with black and paint with white. So we're going to do an Alt backspace. And then I'm going to change my brush to white. I do want a hard brush because it's got some straight edges. So let's zoom in so we can see it a little better. So I'm going to make my brush bigger. And I'm going to make the brush about the size of this curved edge at the top of the bottle. And I'm going to use that trick of drawing a straight line by clicking. And then I'm going to hold my Shift key and click the other end. And it makes it just easier to draw. And I'm going to do that coming down this bottle. And if I continue to hold the Shift key, it will let me keep painting, basically. And then I can come down to the bottom and click here, here, here. Makes it go much faster than trying to do this freehand would be nearly impossible. And then we just fill in the middle. I can make my brush bigger now. And then we're going to change this to overlay. So, oops, let's click on our texture, go to overlay, and we're going to make this about 33%. So you can see from there to just really accented the greens in that bottle. So next I'm going to bring in, I call a sunset kind of a color. And we're going to drag this. And this one I changed to multiply and down to about 20%. So just adding a little bit of warmth to this one. And then I brought in this real grungy, rusty one. Change this to overlay and 70%. And then for this one, I wanted to take a little bit of the texture off of the bottle. So I'm going to use this layer mask and drag this up here. And then I'm going to invert this mask with a Control I because it's the bottle I want to mask. So that way we didn't add more texture to that. And then I wanted to take this into Topaz Studio. So this is where, because Topaz can only read the top layer, but I don't want to flatten my image. So I'm going to create a merged or a stamped image on top of this. And to do that, the keyboard shortcuts are Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. And this is my merged layer, which I always rename so that I know that that's what that layer was. And then I'm going to duplicate that layer because Topaz doesn't create its own layer. And the reason I duplicate it is I figure if I apply something and I come back to Photoshop and I decide I don't like it, I can just delete that layer and I still have my merged layer here. I'm big at working on layers, but that's just my style. You know, it works for me. Everybody's got their own workflow. So this is where sometimes, even though I've done some textures and I've tried to get an image always looking as good as I think it can, sometimes then I'll end up using a preset that will completely change some of the things I've already done. And this is one of those. So I'm going to go into the looks, which are the same as presets. And I'm just going to search and type this one in because I already know the name of it. And oh, it helps. Maybe I spell it right. Oh, because I'm under grungy, I need to have all of the looks. That would be why it's not finding it. Then this lilac wash is the one I chose. So as far as my warmth and all, this one completely changed it. So once you choose a look in here, you just click apply to add it to the layers palette. And then you can modify the opacity here. You can also change a blending mode. And then these are all of the components that make up that preset. So you can come in and change them or eliminate things, or you can turn the eye on and off to see what a particular texture or effect is doing, and decide if you like it or not. I actually like that a little better. So I think I'm going to do it like that because I like that kind of pink in the background. So I'm going to say accept. There you have it. And then I did want to do a slight vignette on this as well. So I'm going to add a layer, but instead of filling with black, I'm going to use this kind of pinkish color in the background. So I'm going to choose my color right from the image by just, instead of choosing in the box here, move my brush over and select maybe one of the darker colors, and then maybe I'll go just slightly darker. And I'm going to do my Alt backspace. And instead of the oval, this time I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to draw probably about like that. And I'm going to go to my select, modify feather, and say OK. And then hit my backspace key to delete the center, Control D to deselect, and then we can adjust the opacity. So just to add a little bit more color to the edges. And then this one, and I'll show you the finished because I know we don't have a lot of time left. I added some words to it. And it's being slow tonight. It's getting tired.
Yeah.
I've been working the computer hard today. So I added a quote, and when I work with type on my images, I like to do some layer styles. On this one, I'll open it up so you can see it. I added a bevel and emboss that kind of gives some highlights and shadows to the letters themselves, gives them more of a kind of a 3D look. And then I utilized a stroke to make the layers a little fatter, because this is the typeface without the stroke and it's very, very thin. So I utilized the stroke and I added 4 pixels to the outside to just make it a little fatter. And I selected the color from the type. And then I also like to do a little bit of a drop shadow. And it just kind of makes the lettering stand out from the image a little instead of just looking like it's, you know, pasted into the middle. And then I just used a different typeface down here and did similar effects. So that's my bloom where you are planted.
And was that a Photoshop font?
This is one I don't remember where I got them, but they are not standard fonts. There's something that I downloaded.
Okay.
Let's see what I used for that one. The Loom is called Illusius, ILLUSIAS. And the other one I think is Intruding Cat. Yep, it is. It's called Intruding Cat, and that's the one. I'm a cat person, so it worked.
Yeah, they're nice fonts. I like them.
Yeah, I have a resource list, and I can send that as well with the follow-up info. And it's a list of places you can get fonts and brushes. Oh, I did want to show you how you can get brushes for free from Photoshop. So if you go to your brush tool, and when you click on your brush panel, if you go up to the little gear wheel here, and this is only for Photoshop CC, click on this little gear wheel and go to Get More Brushes. It launches the Adobe site. And there really are 1,000 brushes in here. It takes a second to load. This is their latest one, is this spring release. And each of these sets have a ton of brushes. And what's really cool is they're very easy to install because it's pretty much automatic. So first you're just going to download it. It's going to go to your downloads folder. And if you just double click it, it will go right to your brush palette. And it will be added to the bottom. Here's the spring 2022. And there are a ton of brushes in here. All of these sets have some really cool stuff. And there's some I haven't tried yet, but I think would make some really good textures in here as well. So take advantage if you're on the Creative Cloud, and you can get yourself some free brushes.
I'll also mention that fonts are available the same way through Adobe. They have a whole series of free fonts. And then if you do spot a font you like, there is some way of asking Adobe what font it thinks that is. It'll give you its closest suggestions.
Oh, that's a cool font. I didn't know that. I'll have to look that up. There's another
That's in the type drop down.
Okay.
I think there's a way to be able to bring up an image and type. I believe you can find what the font was.
I'll have to look at that. There's also a cool thing if you have a bunch of fonts like I do, and you want to see what a particular word is going to look like in a lot of different fonts, instead of going through the whole list, there's a site called Word Market. And this will find all of the fonts in your computer, because fonts are not installed in Photoshop. They're actually installed in your computer, and you can access them in any program on your computer. So you can use them in Word or whatever. So all you do in here is if you type in a phrase, so I'll just type Meredith Images and hit enter, and it's going to search every font in your computer. And then if you wanted to compare, say I was looking for a scripty font, I can click this one and hold my Control key and click this one and this one. And then I can say filter, and it will just show me those, and I could decide between those. You can also do it smaller so you can see more on a page if you want. But this is a free thing, and it's nothing to install. It's just a website. It's called wordmark.it. And it's really cool. I've used it many times when I was designing my new logo and different things like that, and you want to search through your fonts. It's a cool way to do that. And I'll show you just one last really quick one. We're just going to put 2 textures on this one. This is one of my favorite places to shoot here in Tennessee. It's right not too far from our house, maybe 3 miles or so, this railroad bridge, and we're standing on another bridge shooting across at it. And I did do a preset in Lightroom here, But I'm going to add a couple of textures to jazz this up even more. And this are getting a couple of my own. And we're going to change this one to soft light and bring it way down. And then I have this one. This is from one of my Christmas sets, which the last few years I've done a free Christmas set, and it's free for, I don't know, a couple months, and then I add it to the store. I'm going to rotate this so that the darker area is at the bottom. So I'm going to go to edit, transform, rotate 180. And I did this one at overlay and 40%. So just really warm this up really pretty. And I shot this bridge in all the seasons so far. I do in-person Barns and Backroads workshops here in Tennessee, if you're ever in the area, in the spring and the fall. I just had 2 the last 2 weeks, and I've got another one coming up. And this is usually stop 1 on day 1, right after sunrise. And it's a real pretty spot. And there you have it. And I'll throw this up. Any other questions? So this is my blog is meredithimages.wordpress.com. My website is meredithimages.com. You can link to the blog through the website right at the bottom of the front page. And this is the conference I mentioned. And I have my Creating Your Own Textures course and my ebooks and textures and our workshops. So all of that info. Yes.
I think I put your links in the newsletter, so all they have to do is click on there. I think there were 3 of them or something. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
Anywhere, but it's amazing the way you can take a whole hum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
and you got to admit, some of those were pretty ho-hum.
Yeah. And
pretty
make them
boring.
like, wow, I could do.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It really is.
And if you create your own textures, you could use them in those. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Those you can use in competition.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So one question here.
Sure.
Love the way you're blending your textures. Just gives, it's a challenge to go try something like that and to shoot more textures. I noticed, like, when you're doing a larger flower, you tend to mask out the texture, but then on that one of the last ones where there were multiple buds, you did not mask out the texture. So is that kind of a general rule of thumb in the way you approach things, when to mask, when not to mask?
It just depends on, like, let me just drag over the screen instead of reopening. So like for this one that I didn't, I thought the textures were subtle enough that it wasn't really detracting from the, the leaves itself and the bud, where with this one, I thought it needed some of the texture taken away to really focus the viewer's eye on that center of the flower. So it really depends on the actual subject. And, like with this tree, I think it looks fine on everything because I like what it did for the color, because it was a very subtle texture. Where here I masked it off because I didn't want my bird to be green and dark, and I wanted him to stand out from the background.
And a big bird's easier to mask than a bunch of little tiny buds on a branch too.
Yes. I mean, with this one, I could have just put all of the textures behind it if I didn't want them on here, because we did start with that transparent background. So we could just move the flower to the top. Tips are taking a little while tonight. Big files. And I've got lots of things open on my computer, which I really shouldn't, but I probably got about 25 tabs in my browser. I love to open things. Oh, I'll go back to that later. And it's, 3-4 days later, if that, before I sometimes get back to things. So like
I
this
thought
one,
it was interesting.
check that up if we wanted to.
I thought it was interesting, the very first textures you made, that if you'd used browns instead of blues, I think my monitor would have disappeared into my computer desk.
But yeah, I mean, it's so much fun to do. And again, you could do them in so many different ways. So here, the texture is very subtle. So that's why I left it on top. But if you wanted to bring this up to the top of the stack, you could do that as well. So lots of different ways you can go. Anybody else? I'll stop sharing my screen. And there you have it.
It's a lovely area you live in.
That is the view from our back deck.
Oh, wow.
I just want to say thank you, Hazel. I really enjoy your websites and your webinars.
Thank you. Yes, I do monthly webinars that are free as well. So check those out. They're on the website, and all of the previous ones are on my YouTube and Vimeo channels. So you can check those out as well. My next one is on May 17th, it's a Tuesday, and I do them at 4 o'clock Eastern time, but they are all recorded. So if you can't watch it live, you can catch the recording.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you having me. I hope you enjoyed it. Jeffrey, I'll send you a little bit of follow-up stuff. And
yeah, sure. And I'll pass
info.
it out to the rest of the group.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you doing this for us. It's
No
great.
problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Very good presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hope you all enjoyed it and give you a little inspiration, and just jump in there and try it. I always tell people you can't break anything. It's a layer. If you don't like it, you delete it. So, it's all an experiment.
Yep. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I enjoy it a lot. Alrighty. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks. You too.
And good summer.
Thank you.
And we'll see you
Bye.
soon. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Right.
So I guess that concludes our meeting for today. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
See you soon.
Texture on.